Welcome to the Dokmee Workflow and You webinar. First, we need to discuss what is workflow. Workflow is the sequence of industrial, administrative, or other processes through which a piece of work passes from initiation to completion. Let's review a typical workflow scenario. Meet Jim. Jim is in charge of all accounts payable. Jim spends every day processing mountains of paper invoices. This can often lead to paper overload. Most of Jim's time is spent running from department to department to get proper invoice authorization. It sometimes takes Jim several weeks just to get a single invoice approved. This can lead to a lot of wasted time. Looking for a better solution, Jim decided to put on his trusty thinking cap and think inside the box. What did he come up with? Dokmee. Dokmee is a cost-effective approach and is no less than innovative. And what's so great about Dokmee for those dealing with accounting issues? Of course, Dokmee's robust workflow. The features in workflow literally blew Jim away. Now Jim is able to get invoice approval at the click of a button. Email notifications about open invoices are sent to everyone listed in Jim's workflow. Dokmee is obviously making Jim's life easier. It's safe to say it, Jim is in love. Not only did workflow make his life easier, he's able to manage all of his invoice and document processes in one application. In a single day's work, Jim managed to save the company a ton of money and become the office hero. Dokmee allows him to work with super speed and efficiency. So let's talk a little bit about Dokmee's workflow features. Go with the flow with Dokmee's workflow. You get to choose the flow of files within individual departments and between multiple departments of your organization. Users also have access to individual inboxes and are able to set fully customized rules for file routing and actions. You are also able to link to index fields for file routing and automatic index value updates based on approvals and rejections, as well as view a complete history flow for files within each workflow. Automatically apply stamp annotations to your documents. Schedule email notifications with periodic reminders as well. Now, let's get into the workflow demonstration. Over the next few minutes, I'll show you how to actually interact with the interface of Dokmee's workflow. Today we're going to review creating a workflow in Dokmee. First, we're going to discuss setting up your workflow. To create and manage a workflow within Dokmee, the user must first select Workflow from the top toolbar, and then select Workflow Management Studio. Once you're in Management Studio, you're able to right-click anywhere on the canvas to begin creating your workflow by simply selecting Add, or you can select Add from the bottom window menu. The window will then prompt the user to name their workflow. For this demo, we will call it Accounts Payable. Then select OK. From there, you're able to double-click or right-click to start your workflow. If we right-click, we see that we have the options to remove, edit, change color, or rename our workflow. Let's go ahead and click Edit. Once we click Edit, we can see that our workflow diagram begins to appear. If you look over to the right, you can see our workflow steps. If you notice, there are 2 steps. 2 steps is the minimum amount of steps that you can have in any workflow process within inside of Dokmee. You also have the Add User button and Add Step button, Watch Folder for enable watch folders, email notifications, and reminders. By adding steps, you will see the diagram change in real time, so let's go ahead and add some steps. Now we're going to talk about actually going through and creating steps in workflow. So we've already added steps to our process. Now we're going to go in and rename our steps so we know what they are when we're in that particular process. So we're going to go ahead and go to step 1 and rename. I'm going to rename it invoice processing. Step 2, I'm going to go ahead and rename to purchase order matching or PO matching. Step 3, I'm going to rename to originator review. Step 4 will be manager approval. Step 5 will be CFO approval. And step 6 will be release payment. And there we go. You can look over to the left at the diagram and see that all of our steps in our process have been named. Now that we have all of our steps set up, we want to begin adding users into the workflow. Adding users allows us to set who will be responsible for that particular process at any point in time in the workflow. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Invoice Processing, click Add User, and I'm going to go ahead and select the user that would be responsible for processing the invoices. And then I'll do the same thing for the next set of steps. Also note that I can select more than one person for each step, so going into manager approval, I can select 2 people if I need to or more. And there we have it. All of our users have been added to our workflow process. The next step of setting up workflow is to go in and hit Enable Watch Folders. By choosing Enable Watch Folder, any future folder or file that we place into that selected folder will automatically go through the accounts payable workflow process. So by going into selecting Enable Watch Folder, I go down to my invoices and select that folder. Now anything that ever goes into that folder will go through this particular workflow process. Hit Apply. Next, I can set up email notifications. Initial notification is going to send an email notification anytime a file is added into the workflow process. Reminders we can set up to email once they've got their initial notification. If they have not actually gone through and approved or rejected the file, it'll send them an email reminder. I want to go ahead and set every 1 day. Now that we have the basics of the workflow set up, what we want to do is get ready to go ahead and set up our rules. The final step in creating a workflow is to modify the workflow rules. You will find this panel in the bottom of the Dokmee interface. By default, it shows only the traditional rules, such as if item is approved, then it goes to the next step in the process. And you can see that over here in the bottom left. If you want to customize your rules, simply select Add Edit Rule and the rule wizard will pop up. Let's begin by editing some new rules. The first screen of the Rule Wizard shows the current rule steps. So as you can see, we have our basic rules that are set up as by default within Dokmee. When you click Next, you're able to actually change the rules and create either action or routing rules. For this particular point in the demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and choose Action. By hitting Action, it will allow me to choose the step I want to apply the rule to, and then we can select Approval, Rejection, or both. So I'm going to go ahead and select Manager Approval. And then I'm going to go ahead and select Approve. And then I can go in and look at my actions. Actions involve email, update index, stamp document, or move to folder. First, I'll go ahead and show you email. By selecting email, hitting Next, we're able to see a screen pop up that allows us to say who we're sending the email to, selecting a subject and then a message. If I go back to previous, I can select Update Index. Update Index applies the index field to pre-existing indexes within the current cabinet. Here, I can specify which text should be put into the index field. We can also choose to stamp a document. Dokmee is set with preset stamps, which are approved, certified, confidential, paid, and rejected. We'll go ahead and say that we're going to stamp the file approved. So, as we see when we hit next, the rule type is going to be action, assignment, manager approval, in the event that the file is approved. If the file is approved in manager approval, the stamped document with approved. We'll go ahead and hit next. It says the rules have been validated and created. Hit next again. Rule is created. And then finish. Let me go ahead and go back through and I'll show you about moving to a new folder as well. Go ahead and go next. Action. Select the step whenever I release the payment. Upon approval, I'm going to have it moved to a folder. So what I can do is I can actually set up a folder within my index fields stating that this is the folder containing all of our completed invoices or paid invoices. So upon approval, move to a folder, browse, and from here I can create a new folder or select an existing folder. So I want to go into Invoices, New Folder, create a folder called Paid. Hit OK. And now we see that it switches over to our File Explorer and we now see the folder Paid Invoices. Clicking back over to Workflow Management Studio, that process is completely finished. Okay, so now let's discuss routing in Workflow. Let's go back to our main rule screen. So we select Add Edit Rule. We're in our Workflow Wizard. Go through our steps again. And we're going to select Routing. When routing a document through Workflow, you have the option of applying your rule to either a specific step or to all steps of the process. So let's go ahead and click Next. And then I'm going to select Specific Step. And I'm going to say Manager Approval. And hit Next. So an example would be if a file is approved or rejected, you can send it to the next step or to a specific step inside of Workflow. If a file is rejected, you can choose to route it back to the previous step, leave it in the current step, or remove it from Workflow, and so on. So I'm going to go ahead and select Reject. And then I'm going to send to Previous Step. And the reason I'm selecting Send to Previous Step is because we're rejecting the manager approval, so we want it to go back to the previous person so they can look over and find out why. So rule type is routing, manager approval, rejected. If a file is rejected in manager approval, we're going to send to the previous step. Next, we get an error screen saying there's an issue validating a rule to please correct the issue. Basically what it's saying is that by default, Dokmee sets the rules to leave in current step. So the only thing we have to do is simply click Overwrite, and it creates our rule. Hit Finish, and then we see it in the workflow process. So upon manager approval, when a file is rejected, it'll go back to the originator for review. The good thing about Workflow is we're able to set these specifications for every single rule within Dokmee and within our workflow process. So whenever we want to set up custom routing options, we have that ability. Now I want to discuss adding documents to Workflow. Once everything is set up in Management Studio, we can then begin to add documents into the workflow. So let's click back over into our File Explorer. We simply click on our document, so we go into our Invoices folder. I'm going to click on Free Invoice. Right-click, Send to Workflow. And then we were able to select our workflow that we want it to go into. I've already got accounts payable set up, so I select accounts payable. I have my priority level options as low, medium, high, or ASAP. I'm going to go ahead and select ASAP. Click OK. And it says the document marketing invoice already exists in the workflow accounts payable. So I'm going to hit OK. Then I'm going to go ahead and simply click on Workflow, Inbox, and I can see that I've already got invoices set up in my workflow inbox. So any of these invoices that I select will actually go through the accounts payable process. Now, whenever a document is actually added into the workflow process, an email will be sent to notify. So let me pull up my email. I see that I've got Do Not Reply from Dokmee. And then it shows my email. An email from Dokmee, new documents added to workflow. And then it lets me know the documents that have actually been added into the workflow process. Accounts payable and marketing free invoice. Okay, so let's go ahead and close this out. So if we go back into our inbox and we're able to look at the top screen, we can either approve or reject the file. So let's go ahead and select Approve. We'll go ahead and approve all of our invoices that are set into the document. Then you can see that it actually clears everything out of our inbox folder. And then what happens is it sends it to the next person within the workflow. Next, I want to show you what happens if you reject an actual item within the workflow. So let's go back into our workflow inbox. We see we have a new invoice in. We're going to go ahead and select Reject. Once you select Reject, you're given a window that allows you to choose why you're rejecting the file. So let's say totals are not correct. Then select OK. Now we have our invoice in the processing showing that we rejected it, and so it would go to the next step. Another great thing about Dokmee's workflow is that you're able to view the history of the workflow routing, showcasing any approvals, actions, or rejections within your workflow inbox. So let's click right here in the bottom right on Show History. Here we're able to see that the document was added, it was rejected, and the document was viewed. And that pretty much concludes our workflow overview.
Thank you for attending the Dokmee Workflow Overview webinar. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at support@officegemini.com or visit us on the web at www.officegemini.com. Thank you.